In an era when street racing games were everywhere, one title dared to do something different by limiting your garage to just Fords. This is Ford Street Racing, the forgotten racer with a weirdly different vision of racing. Welcome to the Worst Racing Games, the series where you guys comment racing games that you think are terrible, I play them, review them, and rank them. So yes, the sacred Worst Games randomizer gave us Ford Street Racing. Also known as Ford Bold Move Street Racing in America, or Ford Street Racing LA Duel here in Europe. But for the sake of ease, we're just going to refer to it as Ford Street Racing for this video. Ford Street Racing released on PS2, Windows PCs, and the original Xbox in February of 2006 for Europe and September of 2006 for North America. There would then be a PSP port released in late October of 2006. The game was developed by UK-based developer Razorworks, who are primarily known for their other Ford racing entries. So what does Ford Street Racing have to offer? Well, it has 18 different vehicles and 12 different tracks. Some of those vehicles include iconic cars such as the Ford GT line, the Ford Escort line, the iconic Mustang line, and some newer models such as the Fiesta and Focus. The 12 tracks that this game has to offer are all set in LA. Now, 12 tracks actually sounds pretty good for a budget PS2 racing game, but in reality there's more like 6 tracks, and the other 6 are just reversed versions of the previous 6 you'd already played. There's nothing wrong with any of the tracks, in fact most of them are designed pretty well, they're just kind of repetitive. So the game offers 2 distinct styles of racing, solo racing and team racing. So let's jump into solo racing first. So typically your standard solo racing in most games will be the main style of gameplay of that racing game. But here in Ford Street Racing it feels like more of an afterthought. But that is because the team racing was the selling point of the game. Anyway, your solo races are pretty much exactly what they say, they're just standard races across the game's tracks and with any car of your choice that you have unlocked at that point. So let's talk more about the handling of these cars. The game breaks down its cars into 3 different categories: Classics, Performance, and High Performance. So in Classics you have cars such as the Mustang, in Performance you have cars such as the Fiesta, and High Performance you have the GT series. But no matter which class you go for, the handling goes for a more realistic vibe in this game. Does it do it well? It's okay. It has good moments and it has bad moments. Accelerating is fun, overtaking can be fun, but I'll tell you what isn't fun, and that's braking. No matter which class of car you're in, you feel like you have to brake considerably early for a corner, because if you don't, you'll go flying into a wall and slow down significantly. And yeah, I guess that makes sense in terms of the real world, but bearing in mind when you are slowing down into some of these tight corners, the car feels like it's going very slowly, but according to the game you're still going like 75-80 miles per hour, which is not really an ideal speed in the real world to take a corner. Outside of the slightly weird braking, everything else is honestly completely fine. There's nothing particularly exciting or notable about it, the handling is just okay. In terms of the solo racing content, it essentially boils down to you can do a single race or you can do a championship. There's 2 championships per class of car, with one being a regular championship and one being dubbed as a pro championship. Now, I played through both, and the only difference that I could tell was there was one extra race, and each race has an extra lap. It was no more difficult than the previous championship, just longer. It does irritate me when games do this, they call it the pro or the hard version, and what it actually is just a longer, more dragged out version of the cup you've already played. Anyway, I hope you guys are having a fiesta with this video. Sorry, and if you are, then make sure you hit that subscribe button and tap the bell for notifications to stay up to date with the Worst Racing Games series. That's enough plugging the channel, let's get on to the team racing game mode. So the team racing is the real meat and potatoes of Ford Street Racing. And honestly, it really caught me off guard with how in-depth this actually is. So you have a team of either 2 or 3 racers and you are racing against 2 opposing teams. You have to come up with a team name, so this is the Clegends. Again, I'm so sorry. So the game gives you enough cash to get 2 classic cars to start with for both you and your teammate. You can then progress through the championship and then the pro championship, earning more cash and unlocking more cars to be purchased for the team racing mode, and also to be used in the solo racing mode. So at any point during a race, you can swap between your team members, and the other team member that you're not controlling will be controlled by the game's AI. Which is, well, not ideal, but we'll get to that later. You can then instruct any team member that you're not currently playing as to do a couple of different moves for you. So you can either get them to block opponents from overtaking so you can catch up and overtake as well, or you can get them to draft you, and then you can pull away very quickly. Now, the game we looked at last week, Need for Speed Carbon Own the City, actually had a very similar mechanic, and the drafting mechanic in particular felt very overpowered, but to counter this, the game put a 30-second cooldown on it. Ford Street Racing doesn't do this, so you can just infinitely loop your drafts. And you can also do a double draft where you draft onto the teammate, then they overtake you as well. Pulling off these maneuvers, especially at the start of the race doing a load of overtaking, is very satisfying. But it just can't help but feel a little bit cheesy when you've done back-to-back drafting the entire race. So yeah, the draft mechanic is quite overpowered to the point of being basically broken, but the worst part is when you get into the Pro Team Championships, the game basically requires you to use it. If you don't take the best cars from the class that you're racing in, you don't have a chance at all, other than if you draft. Which I get, obviously the game wants you to get the better cars and unlock stuff, but like, if I want to use my escort, let me use my escort. Now, the other part of the team championship that the game frankly does a terrible job of telling you about is damage. Yes, that's right, this game doesn't just have cosmetic damage, it has actual physical car damage, which will affect your car's performance if you don't repair it after each championship, and the longer you leave it, the more it's going to cost to repair. At no point during the 3 different tutorial sections of the Team Championship does the game feel the need to tell you this. It's not like the repairs are expensive, and I quite like the fact that it made me try and drive a bit more carefully, but it's just the fact it doesn't tell you. Interestingly enough, I don't think this mechanic was very well liked, because in the PSP port that would follow a few months later, they added some more cars, they added some more tracks, but they also got rid of the damage. The only damage you had then was cosmetic. So I was pleasantly surprised with the Team Challenge mode in this game. I didn't expect it. When I saw this suggestion pop up, I just thought it was going to be another generic street racer, but there was more to it than I expected. Now, the Team Challenge mode can be fun, but the biggest problem outside of the broken draft is the AI, and that's just a problem with this game as a whole. The AI in this game, especially your teammates, are quite stupid, and you really do have to switch between the teammates to make sure one doesn't fall behind. But when it's most apparent is when you're doing the drafting, because if you start the draft with your AI teammate behind you, the chances are they will probably hit you in some capacity as they go past, because they're unable to move from their set line. And that's also why the blocking mechanic doesn't work half the time, because the AI are just so stupid. Now, on top of these 2 previous game modes I've mentioned, Ford Street Racing has one last trick up its sleeve, and that is Challenge Mode. As you make your way through the Team Championships, you will unlock various challenges. And I was quite excited for this because I love a good challenge mode in a racing game. I mean, look at Mario Kart DS. I wasn't exactly expecting too much, but what we got was not much at all. The only real game mode differences that challenge mode has are a couple of time trials. Otherwise, it's just more team races or solo races with set cars. That's it. I mean, I appreciate that the game is trying to get me to use all these different cars, but they could have come up with something a bit more exciting for a challenge mode rather than just recycling the same content over and over. But then again, maybe I should just stop moaning because this is just an extra mode tacked on to the main game. Now, if you've made it this far into the video, then please simply comment Fiesta down below. So that's enough about the gameplay of Ford Street Racing. How does it hold up in terms of design? Well, the car models themselves are actually pretty impressive. They all look fairly detailed, and there seems to be some decent reflection work when you're in-game as well. There were most certainly better looking racing games, especially in terms of their car models in 2006, but these were all on next-gen hardware, not the PS2. The world itself looks okay, it's not terrible, but the lighting effects in this game are not particularly good. It can go from being incredibly bright to incredibly dark with no in between, and if you're playing in the dark, that can be very problematic. I mean, I think the team did a decent enough job with the visuals with what they had to work with, but it could have been better. Now, in terms of audio, the game succeeds and fails at the same time. It succeeds in terms of its car sound effects. Accelerating feels very nice, the sound effects just sound pretty real, which I guess has something to do with Ford themselves. However, this game has no in-game race music. Why? Why is there no music at all? There could have been just some generic backing music, and at least that would have created a bit more of an atmosphere, but no, there is nothing but you and the sound of the car for every single race. The menu has some very generic 2000s music, why can't the rest of the game have it? It just doesn't make very much sense to me. Again, I appreciate this is a budget title, but surely something could have been done to just put even 1 or 2 tracks looping across the various races. It doesn't have to be loud, just some background noise so I'm not just left with this every single race. So how well did Ford Street Racing review? Well, the game currently holds a 50 out of 100 on Metacritic, and I'm gonna be honest, I've definitely played much worse games even in this series with higher review scores than this. I would say this game should sit around the 60 mark personally, but that's just me. The game also holds a 5.8 out of 10 user score, so it's looked back on slightly more favourably from the general public. Now, unfortunately, I wasn't really able to find any reliable sales figures for this game, or, well, really any at all, so if I had to estimate, I would say this game probably sold a couple of 100,000 units. I'm not really sure. The only sale figure I could find was for the PSP version that released a few months later, and according to VG charts, that only sold about 40,000 copies. At the end of the day, this is a budget title. It feels like a budget title, but it does actually have some decent ideas considering what it is. So now comes the time where we have to rank Ford Street Racing, and for me, this is just a meh game. It's fairly harmless, it's very cheap, it's just okay. It has some decent ideas, but I can't look past the fact that there are some baffling design choices within those ideas, such as incredibly broken drafting. On top of this, I just don't think the game's aged very well in terms of its visuals, or in terms of its car handling, and also it can get boring after playing it for a while, especially because there's no music. So how would you rank this game? Would you rank it differently? Did you play this game growing up? Tell me all about it in the comments down below, and as always, if you have a suggestion to add to the sacred wheel of worst racing games, then let me know as well. And with that, we come to the end of this episode of Worst Racing Games. Thank you guys very much for watching. If you enjoyed, please leave a like, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe and tap that bell for notifications of my future uploads. I will see you in my next video. Bye bye.